Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Soul Struggles, where we talk about everyday struggles. Today we have Dr. Christine Agaibi with us. Dr. Christine is a therapist with master's and doctoral level training in counseling psychology, focused in resilience. Dr. Christine, thank you for coming here today with us again.
Thank you for having me.
Today we are going to dive into a really deep topic, and I believe we need a couple of episodes to cover it. But we're gracious enough that Dr. Christine is going to try to summarize it for us. So today's topic is depression. Dr. Christine, my question to you, would you say adversity leads to depression? Is adversity the same as depression?
Very interesting question, because adversity is nothing new, right? We've heard about adversity from biblical times. We have tons of stories from the Old and the New Testament of people that have gone through adversity. Job comes to mind. Joseph being sold into slavery by his brothers and betrayed and thrown into prison, eventually being second command in Egypt. We've heard about Naomi and Ruth losing husbands and children. Lots of stories of adversity. Adversity doesn't always lead to depression. It can lead to eventual resilience, as these stories from the Bible describe. However, if it is not kept in check, it could turn into depression. So we have to keep it in check, similar to how those individuals from the Bible described their adversity, that they did not give up, that they had hope, because it's a normal part of life. It does not mean that we have less faith or anything. It's just a normal part of life. So how do we deal with it?
How does depression show physically? When does it become a disorder?
Yeah, that's a really important question as well, because we all have ups and downs, right? We can get some bad news one day or have a bad day, as we say, and feel a little depressed, but that's not necessarily the clinical depression diagnosis. We call things depression when they start to really affect our functioning. If somebody does not want to get out of bed in the morning for several weeks at a time and does not want to go to school, does not want to do their everyday functioning, they no longer want to communicate with family and friends. If the frequency of their symptoms have increased, before it was just 1 or 2 days here and there, and now it's every single day for a couple weeks at a time. If the intensity of it, if you name it on a scale from 0 to 10, and before it was 1 or a 2 or a 3, and now it's a 10 every day, then the intensity of it has increased. And if the duration of it has increased, then that's something we need to look at too. So it's lasting much longer than before. Before you could snap out of it, if you will, and now you can't. And you can't get out of bed, and you can't function, you can't do anything. And if there's a lot of withdrawal and isolation, if you're not coping correctly, using substances, separating from family and friends, not going to work, not going to school, not doing your everyday functioning, some people may even have difficulty with things like hygiene or eating or sleeping. Those are all signs that something is wrong and that we should really focus on getting some professional help and talking to somebody about it. So those are all some signs.
Would you say some forms of depression are genetic?
Yeah, so we could have a genetic predisposition to a certain disorder, just like to certain physical disorders. A person can have a genetic predisposition, let's say, to heart disease. But if they don't eat healthy, if they don't exercise, that pushes that heart disease sooner, right? And so this is something similar with depression. If we don't take care of it, if we have a predisposition already and we don't take care of it by, doing the right things, doing self-care, watching out for burnout, not relying on other people for support, those kinds of things, that depression can come sooner and faster when circumstances that are difficult hit. So we've got to be aware of it for sure.
Right. Well, when dealing with depression, what's happening right now in social media, especially with COVID, there's a rise awareness of mental health. But what we've seen, at least what I've seen, the constant messaging of ideas and what to do and steps in dealing with depression. Do you think that's necessarily healthy to rely on versus finding your own way to resist depression and finding your own history and maybe looking like into like genetics, like we were saying? Does that help, or is it something that we really need to focus on our own history, on our own way of dealing with it, rather than somebody else's suggested steps or tips or whatnot?
Yeah, so that's a really great question, and I think that it's really important to understand that there's two parts of that, and part of it is actually what you said is, what professionals do. What professionals do is they use scientific, evidence-based practice to help a person change how they think about a problem, to stop catastrophizing, to reframe their thinking towards something positive. Sometimes psychiatrists are necessary for medication because there's a medication chemical imbalance that needs to be adjusted as well. So both of those are very helpful and important. It is also important for us to use our own history, like you said, because if you've lived to a certain point, you've gone through some sort of trauma, some sort of difficulty, lost a job, lost a relationship, had some sort of bump on the road. And how did you recover from that? That's what's really important. And your way may be a little bit different than my way. But that's important to look at as well, is how you escape that vulnerability, how you escape that difficult time, and what tools did you use to help yourself. It could be social support, it could be church, it could be other means that you used. So applying all of those techniques are really important as well, because your own history is really important, because you have overcome something in the past. So between that and the corroborating evidence from family, if you don't remember how you overcame something, that could be helpful. But using those tools, that's really helpful and really, really important, so that you can overcome this struggle that you're going through right now, if you have those same tools.
Now, my next thing with this topic is that, towards the end, we try to bridge some of the psychology practices with our faith. And my question to you is, what are some of the practices that you've seen over the years, maybe dealing with patients from our church or our faith in general, that parallel or bridges the psychology part of it, secular versus what our churches already have that could help to deal with depression?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, because it is important to bridge the two. And again, look at how you overcome adversity. Do you look at it as a challenge, or do you tend to get in despair when you're going through a difficult time? Do you see yourself as hopeful, that there is hope, which is obviously a very spiritual and religious principle, but it's also a psychological principle. It's putting a hopeful spin on things, that it's not always going to be this way, it's not always going to be difficult. Or do you see it as discouragement? And so obviously, if you see it as helpful, if you see it as a challenge, not as despair, you're able to overcome that difficult situation. Because again, adversity exists. We can't just escape and run away from it. It's unfortunately a part of life, but it's a part of life that can cause us to grow. So adversity exists, but resilience also exists. And so it's really important that we focus on, how do I change and grow out of this situation? I may not be able to get rid of the situation itself, but how do I grow beyond it? How do I develop as a person? How do I see the situation as surmountable, not insurmountable? And those are kinds of things that we need to do as well. And look at ourselves holistically. How can I fix this from a biological perspective? Maybe I need to sleep more or eat better. Maybe I need to fix this from a psychological perspective, that I need to think differently and look at the perspectives of things, how they change. And socially, maybe I need to challenge myself with the relationships do I have. Are they good relationships? Are they healthy relationships? So I need to look at myself holistically and not just look at one perspective. And then also from the spiritual perspective, am I connected to God? Am I far away from God? Am I connected to a church that I can communicate with and communicate with others, and be a part of that body of Christ as well?
I think lastly, meditation. That's something that used as one of the solutions to depression.
Yeah, absolutely. And meditation, from our perspective, from our church perspective, we can, the Agaibi is a great tool. The Agaibi is a great tool because we are able to really focus in on that moment, not think too far ahead and become anxious, or think too far behind and become depressed, but we're focused in on the moment and also connecting with God at the same time, to hear Him and for Him to hear us as well.
Great, Dr. Christine. It's great spending time with you. Thank you so much
well
for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us for another episode of Soul Struggles. Until we see you next time.